Okay, today we're going to take a look at another very fun and very aggressive opening, the Evans Gambit. Now, I'm not going to cover this too deeply. I just want to give you an introduction to the opening, show you the beginning moves, show you some of the tactics, and explain why this opening is, well, has been very popular. So the Evans Gambit starts off just like the Scotch Gambit and the Greco Gambit do. It's a double king pawn opening, and after move bishop c5, we looked at c3. Move. So we're immediately attacking the bishop. Now, of course, you might notice, hey, that pawn is unguarded and black can take it. And black probably should take it. It's probably black's best move to go ahead and accept the Evans Gambit and take the pawn. Now, taking it with the knight is definitely not the best way. First of all, the knight was guarding the pawn, so if white wants, white can simply retake the pawn. White could even consider, after knight takes pawn, playing just c3 anyway. So taking with the knight is not a very good move. Taking with the bishop is the correct way to accept the Evans Gambit, and by far and away the most popular way to accept the Evans Gambit. So white is going to play c3. Now, when I teach my students this opening, I explain that the purpose of c3 is two parts. Number one, you want to build a supercenter. You're supporting the push d4, totally taking over the center with pawns. But number two, you're also opening the way for queen b3. And this queen and bishop battery on b3 is going to be very deadly, aiming at f7. So when I show my students this opening, I also tell them, if the bishop retreats anywhere along this diagonal, okay, so any of these squares, of course f8 is kind of silly to go all the way back, but if it retreats to c5, d6, or e7, you simply go d4 and you have a monster pawn center, okay? And white is in very good shape already. It's worth it to give up the pawn already. We still have the idea queen b3, and of course if they take, our pawns are dominating in the center of the board. That's what we like to see. Okay. So, well, what happens if bishop a5? Now the point is, if we go d4, the bishop is pinning our pawn to the king. So after pawn takes pawn, we cannot take back. There's a pin here, an absolute pin. Well, what should you do? The answer is go d4 anyway. The Evans Gambit is a very aggressive opening. We're not worried about pawns. In the Evans Gambit, our idea, our plan, is to open up a whole bunch of files, a whole bunch of diagonals, and just directly attack the black king. So we're not worried about pawns. What we're going to do is we're going to develop quickly, we're going to take over the middle, and we're going to open lines to attack with. And that's the idea of sacrificing this pawn. Okay, well, we can't take back. What should we do? Should we block the pin? No, way too slow. Captain Evans, the inventor of the Evans Gambit, would never play a slow move like this. Instead, we're just going to castle, which not only does it escape the pin, so if black just does something normal, well, here we would of course attack the knight. But if black does something else normal, we could just take our pawn back and dominate the center. Okay. Of course, the question is, after castles, what if black takes our pawn? They could take yet another pawn, and if you count them up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is more than 5. We've given up 3 whole pawns. But white has a very powerful attack after queen b3, and there is that bishop and queen battery we talked about. A battery is when you have 2 pieces on the same line, aiming the same direction, making powerful threats. Okay, well, the pawn has to be guarded. Knight h6 won't do the trick. We simply snap that knight off right away, and we say check. Okay, king is in trouble already. So the pawn can only be guarded with a queen move, queen e7 or queen f6. Now, neither of them, unfortunately for black, are all that great. Now, queen e7, here, if I were white, I would simply take my pawn back. And just to give you an example, well, knight d5 is a big deal, but just to give you an example of some of the trouble that black could get into incredibly quickly. For example, if they take the knight, queen takes, hitting the pawn here, okay, on g7, knight f6, e5, exclamation point, okay, and the point is, if the knight moves away, bishop a3 is a big deal. Okay, bishop a3 is a very big deal. Of course, if knight e4 will just come in and threaten the knight some... Oh, what? Don't hang your queen, guys. Don't move quickly and hang the queen. Move somewhere safe and threaten the knight on e4, like maybe queen e3 looks pretty solid. Okay, and we still have the idea of bishop a3. Keep that in mind. for later. Oh, why is bishop a3 such a big deal? You might say, hey, black can block. Well, remember, open lines is the key to this opening, the highway of doom. Oh yeah, and there's also this whole problem of that pawn still hanging with a fork. Okay, being aware of tactics, looking for attacks and threats you can do, and open lines, that's the key to the Evans Gambit. We have much better development if you just look at this position. White has pretty much every single piece developed, including the rooks, which can easily access the middle of the board in open files. Black has some problems. Not castled, the bishop is 2 moves away from coming out, and black's pieces really are not working together. Plus, oh, by the way, he's threatened. Okay? So that's the idea of the Evans Gambit. We give up some pawns, but we open up attacking lines. Now, a more common way to defend the pawn is to go queen f6, which actually is making a big threat, too, in some cases. You have to watch out for discoveries on the rook on a1. So, in this case, white goes pawn e5. And this is a neat trap because, well, first of all, taking the pawn is not very wise at all. I mean, white could pin the knight. White could also simply take the knight, followed up by the same check. And this is very, very, very bad for black. Okay? So, taking e5 is simply out of the question. Well, if we don't take e5, we have to remember our queen is guarding the f7 pawn, so queen g6 to keep guarding the pawn. But now again, white can simply take the pawn back. And if we look at the board, white is pretty much totally developed. Both knights are in the game, the queen and bishop are attacking. The bishop here on c1 is 1 move away from maybe going to a3 and causing some trouble there. This is really not a lot of fun for black. White is in good control of the game here. Now, black's biggest problem, let's say knight ge7, bishop a3, and we'll even play a couple more moves. Castle, black can get castled. Black's biggest problem is if white just keeps making normal moves, like let's say rook to d1, maybe even thinking about bishop d3, okay? If white just keeps making normal moves, black kind of runs out of stuff to do. I mean, this knight is pinned and attacked. How do you get the bishop into the game? If black goes pawn to b6, well, now all of a sudden the c7 pawn is in serious danger. Okay, of course, pawn to d6 is not playable. Well, it's playable, but okay, there's lots and lots of pressure here. This is not going to work out very well. So black has a really hard time getting this bishop out. They have a really hard time getting this rook out. And even if everything goes according to plan, you still might be able to trap their queen or something crazy like that. So this is a really powerful attacking opening. I recommend it for club-level players. Anybody particularly under the rating of 1500 can have a lot of attacking fun with this opening. And I've seen some really quick victories for white. One of the things I like about it is it helps you work on your attacks. It helps you work on noticing threats, on recognizing that pawns aren't everything, and sometimes an open line or a developed piece, especially in the opening, is worth much more than a single pawn. So have fun with the Evans Gambit, enjoy playing it, it's a really super fun opening, there's lots of cool traps you can do, and look for more opening introductions coming up soon. Alright, this has been 5 Minute Theory. Please remember to subscribe so you can see future videos, and leave a comment if you want.